Today we're going a bit more technical, as I'll be doing a simple tutorial on particles. Or at least I'm going to try. I'm John, by the way. Thanks for dropping by. Now, if you know nothing about generating particles in After Effects, this might be the video for you. You can get really creative with this and apply it to a bunch of different scenes. A billboard exploding into 1,000 particles, a rogue AI disintegrating into pixels, fake snow across a fake tower, or in our particular scenario, a disembodied spirit face floating into limbo. So let me first give a quick rundown of how I shot my scene. To do that, we first need a dark room. Ooh, spooky. I have here two of my Nanlite tube lights, and I got these fabric grids through B&H Photo. These took forever, by the way, but they're definitely worth it. And of course, my FX3. Now, I didn't want my disembodied spirit to have a recognizable face, so we are intentionally putting our shot out of focus. And basically, all I did was rock back and forth in my seat and just rotated the lights in and out to create the visual of a spooky, faceless, floating spirit that was coming in and out of the shadows. The grids were very helpful because they minimized light from spilling into the surroundings, and so we're able to maintain the illusion that we're in limbo, and not just in my room. We could even pull off an alien coming to abduct someone with this, or maybe even Lord Voldemort. I shot this in 120p, by the way, so I could do a nice slow motion in post. So I imported the clip into Premiere Pro, picked the part that I wanted with the in and out points in the source monitor, and dragged that into my timeline. Right-clicked and slowed down the footage to 40%, dragged my adjustment layers with my color grades to check how my footage was looking, then right-clicked and pushed that out into After Effects. Now, I didn't want to go overboard with my visual effects. Number one, I'm not an expert on this, but I do love doing it and it's something I want to get better at. And number two, I wanted to keep it minimal so it doesn't look too out of place. My visual reference definitely was the spice hallucination scene in Dune Part 1. It's not going to be completely the same, but the essence is there. Of course, I don't have sand, I don't have a wind machine, I definitely don't have a $100 million budget, but I do have After Effects. So in After Effects, let's first create a new white solid layer, label that small particles. Then we'll add the effect CC Particle Systems 2, and this is the default particles that you'll get. It looks like fireworks, but we'll be turning that into dune dust in a bit. So we'll go into the Particle tab and then go to Particle Type. There's a bunch here you can test out, but I use Quad Polygon to get that dust-like particle, which is what we're going for. Then go to Birth Color and make it white. Then Death Color and make it a light green or another color that's in your scene. We'll also be adjusting the birth size to 0.01 and the depth size to 0.02. And for the particle animation, we'll be using Vortex, which creates this volcano-like explosion with particles going up from the bottom, which is what we want, to get that sense of floating up. We're going to go into the Producer tab and change the position to be off-screen, and then play around with the X and Y radius so we can distribute and scatter our particles. Here I picked 114 on X and 39 on Y. And we can also adjust the birth rate, which is the amount of particles produced at a given time, and also the longevity, which makes the particles last longevity. By the way, all these numbers I'm using, I'm just eyeballing and trying to figure out as I go along. You can copy them, but I encourage you to try out the settings and play around with it, see how it affects your scene, and see what fits. Then on to the Physics tab, I play around with gravity, resistance, and velocity. Adjusting the gravity will let the particles float or drop down because gravity. Resistance will give that bit of pushback, and velocity is just how fast those particles are projected from where they spawned. So I picked -0.2 for gravity, 7.7 for resistance, and 1.6 for velocity. Here you can see me make some adjustments to the X and Y radius in the Producer tab to 165 and 81 to compensate for the adjustments we made in the particle physics. So everything's still moving a little too fast for my taste, and you can play around with these settings some more, but as a quick fix, I'm just going to right-click on this layer and then do a time stretch and extend that out to slow down the particle movement further. Now we're going to pre-compose this layer and then move all the attributes into the new composition so we can do our masking. I'm just doing a quick mask here of my face using the pen tool, nothing too clean, I'll fix this up later. And then I'll go into the layer, into mask properties, invert the mask so our particles are only seen in the background. I dragged our particle layer to the left so that it starts off with the particles already there. If you don't, the particles will begin to appear a few seconds into the composition, and we don't want this for our scene, we want it to be there at the very start. Now dragging the layer will cause it to be cut off. We can simply go into this new composition we made, go to the composition settings, and extend the duration so the particles have more party time. After making sure this layer is filled up all the way to the right, if it's not yet already, we go back to our original composition and make sure we fill up the entire right side as well. We'll then add a camera blur effect and leave it at 5.0 for now. And we'll be adding a nice glow effect as well, 3 glow effects specifically. The first one will be more intense at 0.8 with a smaller radius at 10. Duplicate that, and the second less intense at 0.6, bigger radius at 100. Duplicate again, and this last one will be even less intense at 0.4 but an even bigger radius at 150. Now looking at our composition, the 3 glows are a bit too intense for my liking, as these are just going to be background particles, so I'll be turning off all of them except for the first one. And then finally, I'll be adding a new adjustment layer on top and dragging a chromatic aberration effect to it. We want this to be subtle, so I'm only adjusting the red aberration to -1.5, the blue aberration to 1.5, and the fall off distance to 3. This will just help pull everything together. Now what I've learned after watching tons and tons of visual effects videos on here is that we want to layer our effects. So we can create 3-dimensionality, we can make things look as real as possible, give it more depth, really help sell the visuals. That's why we're going to have several layers of the particles. That's why we're also going to have several glow effects on each particle layer. And that's why we'll be tweaking the effects for each layer to match the scene as much as we can. So continuing on, we are going to be copying this white solid from our small particles pre-comp, and we are going to paste it back into our main composition. Drag it to the left so the particles have already spawned at the beginning of the composition, and then adjusting the birth and death size to 0.03. The birth rate to 0.7 and the longevity to 3.8. We will be increasing the birth radius in X and Y to 232 and 93 respectively, and adjusting the resistance to 9.4. We're going to pre-compose this layer, name it medium particles, move the attributes to the new composition, and we're going to mask again. One on each side and animating the mask path. Remember to click the stopwatch. I forgot to do this on my first try and had to do it all over again. We simply want to follow the movement of the shadows. This is just going to create that illusion that the particles are hidden at first, then revealed by the surrounding light. We are then going to copy our effects from the small particles composition into the medium particles and making adjustments to the camera blur, turning it to 7.0, and turning on the second and the third glow. You'll also notice that there are some particles here that are a bit darker. We'll remedy that later. Now again, we're going back to our medium particles pre-comp, copying the white solid back into the main composition and adjusting that. I'll be picking Tri-Polygon this time around for fun, adjusting the random seed and changing the physics to twirly, that's a really fun name, and adjusting the birth size to 0.08 and the death size to 0.07. If you plan to mask this, you can again pre-comp this layer and maybe name it big particles. Again, we will be copying our 4 effects into this and adjusting the camera lens blur to 15. Then we'll make this into a 3D layer. If you don't have that checkbox present like I do, right-click on the columns and make sure the switches are checked. Then go down here and check the box with the cube header. That will make this layer into a 3D layer. We then go to the position and animate the Z position so that the particles move towards the camera to give it even more depth. Play around with these until you're happy. I'm not yet, so I'll just be going over everything. I basically went back and forth adjusting my particle properties, adjusting the opacities of the different particle layers, cleaning up the masks, and doing a time stretch for the other 2 layers which I forgot to do. I then made the 3D animation at the Z position a little bit more pronounced by animating it in the last few seconds to make it seem like the spirit is moving the particles towards the camera. I think this looks super cool. Wait, before we finish up, I promise that we're going to remedy those dark particles. Simple solution is me dragging the camera blur effect down right after the third glow effect so that it happens after the glow effect. We can also change up color A and color B, make sure that they are a nice light color, and change glow based on to alpha channels for all the glows. This should put back everything into a nice white glow, or if you like that effect with the darker shadows, then keep it as it is. I then go back into Premiere Pro, recheck my colors, and add an adjustment layer with an exposure animation to overexpose the image in the last second, and add another adjustment layer with a chromatic aberration and animate that in the last second as well. These effects will tie up basically with the particles moving towards the camera and pull in everything together. And that's it. This is just a quick and easy way of doing this. Again, particles are pretty fun to use. You can play around and experiment with the settings and apply them into a whole bunch of scenarios, as I've shown earlier. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble as always. If you do get to try these, or if you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll try to help as best as I can. And if you have any tips that you can give, feel free to share them too. Well, that's it. Back to playing Texas Chainsaw Massacre. See you soon, guys. Bye.